Lorraine, Vance Hollister said, holding up the prepaid Visa card with two fingers, the way you might hand her back something you did not want to keep touching. You've been a real trooper for us. 45 years, that's something. Her name was Loretta. He had signed her annual reviews for 9 straight years. He had quoted her tolerance numbers in 2 earnings calls. He had stood at a podium 6 months earlier and used the phrase, "our master machinists," and gestured in her direction. He still called her Lorraine. Loretta Briggs took the card. She did not correct him. She walked across the parking lot to her old grey Buick and sat behind the wheel with the gift card on the passenger seat and the dented aluminum lunch pail her grandfather had carried in 1952 on the floorboard, and she watched the front doors of Mercer Industrial Works close behind 86 other people whose lives had just been reduced to $200 and a handshake. Have you ever been called the wrong name by the man who signed your paychecks for nearly a decade? A year later, Vance Hollister would sit across a polished table from 2 FBI agents and a Department of Justice prosecutor, and his attorney would tell him for the 3rd time to stop talking. He would not be there because of the day he closed the factory. He would be there because of what he tried to do after a 63-year-old black woman bought the building back from the county for $1 and refused to let him buy it from her for $50,000. This is the story of how he got to that table and how she did not. Loretta Briggs was born in Pine Grove, Georgia, in 1962, in the back bedroom of a shotgun house her grandfather Thomas had built with his own hands. Thomas Briggs was the first black machinist ever hired at Mercer Industrial Works. He got the job in 1952 because a foreman named Henry Mercer Jr. watched him unload a delivery truck and recognized something in the way he handled weight. The foreman told Thomas the colored entrance was on the east side of the building, but the lathe he was about to teach him to run was on the main floor with everyone else, and Thomas would have to figure out the rest. Thomas figured out the rest. He worked at Mercer for 31 years. Loretta heard that story exactly twice from her grandfather before he died. He did not tell stories about himself the way some men did. He told them once, plainly, and let you carry the meaning yourself. Her father, Earl Briggs Sr., worked at Mercer for 28 years before a press brake took 2 fingers off his right hand in 1979, and the company settled for $9,000 and a permanent reassignment to the warehouse. Earl never complained out loud. He raised 3 children with 1½ hands and a wife who taught 3rd grade at the integrated school, where the white parents made sure she got the room without windows. Loretta started at Mercer in September 1979, 3 months after her father's accident. She was 17. She walked into the personnel office with her grandfather's old lunch pail in her hand and asked for a job. The personnel man looked at the lunch pail and said the floor was no place for a young lady. She said her grandfather and her father had both worked the floor, and she did not see how she was different. He hired her as a sweeper. Within 6 months, she was running a lathe. Within 2 years, she was running her own station. By 25, she was the most accurate machinist in the building, and there was a measurement gauge in the quality control room that the foreman called the Loretta number because she was the one who set it. She finished her engineering degree at night, driving 48 miles each way to Tuskegee for 8 years. The factory paid for none of it. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering in 1991. The day after she got her diploma, the plant manager offered her a salaried position as a junior engineer. The salary was $4,000 a year less than what she made hourly with overtime. She thanked him and said she would think about it. She kept thinking for 33 more years. She filed 2 patents in the late 90s for fixture designs that reduced setup time on a particular family of agricultural shaft components. The patents belonged to Mercer because she had developed them on company time. The plaque went up in the front lobby with her name on it. She got a $500 bonus and a steak dinner at the Sizzler in Macon. She married Earl Briggs in 1985. He spent 40 years pastoring First Tabernacle Missionary Baptist on the north side of Pine Grove and retired in 2022. They had 2 children. Renee was a partner now at a labor and employment firm in Birmingham. Anthony ran a cybersecurity practice in Atlanta. Neither of her children needed her, which was a thing she was proud of and a thing she did not know what to do with. Sterling Capital Group bought Mercer in 2015. Loretta noticed the changes the way she noticed everything, slowly and in detail. The maintenance budget shrank. They stopped replacing tooling on schedule and started running it past wear. The reject rate climbed. She wrote it up the way she had been trained to do 30 years earlier. The reports went up the chain and disappeared. Vance Hollister became regional vice president in 2016. He was 46 then, with an MBA from a school he mentioned often, and a habit of saying he had come up through operations even though no one could find anyone who had ever seen him operate anything. He visited the Pine Grove plant once a year. He walked the floor with a clipboard. He asked questions that made Loretta tired. He called her Lorraine the first time they met. She corrected him. He apologized the way a man apologizes for stepping on a foot at a wedding. The next year he called her Lorraine again. She corrected him again. By the 3rd year she stopped correcting him. Some battles are not worth the breath. In 2019, a junior shift supervisor named Andre Whitman, 26, 2 years out of an HBCU engineering program, was brought in on a recruitment program Sterling had announced with a press release. Andre was sharp. He learned the floor in 8 weeks. Vance came through on his annual visit and stood next to Andre during a process review and said, in front of 3 other supervisors and 2 foremen, "Well, you're certainly a credit to your program, son. We don't really need to widen our net much further. We've got the talent we need." Andre kept his face still. Loretta, 15 feet away, kept hers still too. 2 months later, Andre took a job at a Caterpillar plant in Tennessee. The HBCU recruitment program quietly ended that fall. There was no press release. Loretta knew things about Vance Hollister that he did not know she knew. He had closed 11 plants in 9 years. His bonus was tied to closure savings. His college roommate sat on a real estate development board in Atlanta. And because Margaret Whitfield in accounts payable had told her at Margaret's retirement party in 2021, Vance had quietly asked twice for the assessed value of the Pine Grove building and the 4 acres around it. Loretta did not say any of this to everyone. She kept it the way her grandfather had kept things, in a quiet place, because you never knew when you would need to take something out and look at it. The closure announcement came on a Tuesday morning in March 2024, in the same break room where she had eaten her grandfather's leftovers 1,000 times. Vance flew in the night before. He stood at the front of the room in a charcoal suit that fit him expensively, and he read from a 1-page statement that Human Resources had vetted. He said the words consolidation and market headwinds and difficult decision. He said effective April 30th. He did not say goodbye. He did not say I'm sorry. He said your service has been valued. The verb was in the past tense before the room had even processed the present. 87 people stood and absorbed it. Nobody yelled. A young pipe fitter named Diego started to cry quietly, and his foreman put a hand on his shoulder and held it there. A man named Bill Torres, who had run a forklift at Mercer for 22 years, took off his ball cap and looked down at it and turned it in his hands. Then Human Resources set up the table by the door. The gift cards were in a clear plastic box, $200 each. The HR woman handed them out one by one. She was new. She had not been in the building before that morning. She did not know any of their names. Loretta got in line. The line moved. When she reached the table, Vance was standing beside it, doing what he probably believed was the gracious thing, the thing that distinguished a real leader from a hatchet man, shaking each hand. Saying a personal word, he saw her. His face arranged itself into a particular expression she had seen on his face every March for 9 years. "Lorraine," he said, and held out the card. "You've been a real trooper for us. 45 years, that's something." She took the card. She held it in her left hand. She looked him in the eye for a long moment. She did not correct him. "It's Loretta," said the white foreman behind her without raising his voice. His name was Jimmy Dolan. He had been at Mercer for 31 years. He had a bad left knee, a worse attitude, and a habit of speaking up at moments other people thought were over. "Her name is Loretta Briggs. She's our master machinist. She's been the master machinist for 23 years. She holds 2 patents on the Mercer 4400 series. There's a plaque with her name on it 12 feet behind you, Mr. Hollister." Vance did not turn to look at the plaque. He kept his eyes on Loretta. His expression shifted, a small reset, a smoothing of features. "Of course, Loretta. My apologies. I appreciate your contribution to the floor team." The floor team, not the engineering team, not the leadership team, the floor team. The patents she held had run on the company's books for 26 years. Her name on a plaque he had walked past 100 times. "Thank you," she said. Just that. She turned and walked across the parking lot to her car and sat behind the wheel with the gift card on the passenger seat. She watched the building she had walked into when she was 17 years old. She watched it the way you watch a house you grew up in, the day they hand you the keys back at the closing and tell you it is somebody else's now. Then she drove home. Earl was in the kitchen when she came in. He was making coffee. He looked at her face and set the pot down. "When?" he asked. "End of April." He nodded once. He came around the counter and put both his hands on her shoulders. He did not say it would be all right. He had been a pastor for 40 years. He knew what people needed and what they did not need. He stood with her in the kitchen, and the silence between them was the silence of 2 people who had built a life on knowing when to stop talking. "What did he say to you?" Earl asked finally. "He called me Lorraine." Earl closed his eyes for a second. He opened them. 45 years, he said. 45 years. "And what did you say?" "Nothing. Jimmy Dolan said something. I didn't." Earl studied her face. He had been studying it for 39 years. He knew the difference between her quiet and her thinking quiet. "Loretta," he said slowly, "what are you going to do?" She did not answer right away. She walked over to the kitchen window and looked out at the pecan tree her father had planted in 1971. She thought about her grandfather, who had walked into that factory in 1952 when there was a separate water fountain for him and a back stairwell he was supposed to use, and who had run a lathe better than any white man on the floor. She thought about her father and the press brake and the $9,000. She thought about her own 45 years and the patents on a plaque and the gift card on the kitchen table and the man who could not remember her name. "I don't know yet," she said. What she did not tell Earl was that she had been thinking about it since the moment Vance said her name wrong for the 9th time. Maybe since 2019, when she watched Andre Whitman's face stay still. Maybe since 1979, when the personnel man told her the floor was no place for a young lady. She had been thinking her whole life about what you do with a building when the people who own it stop deserving it. The weeks after the closing were the strangest weeks of her life. She woke at 4:30 every morning because her body did not know how to do anything else. She made coffee. She carried her grandfather's lunch pail to the kitchen table and set it there because she did not know where else to put it. She sat. She watched the kitchen clock. She drove past the empty factory 3 times a week, sometimes more. The for sale sign went up in July. The county valued the property at $600,000 on paper, but everyone who actually understood the local market knew the real number. The building had a leaking roof, an outdated electrical service, and an environmental file thick enough to stop a developer in his tracks. Sterling listed it at 400. They got no offers, they dropped to 250. They got no offers, they stopped answering the listing agent's calls. By September, the county had filed for delinquent property taxes. By October, they had scheduled a tax auction. The starting bid would be $1. Loretta heard about the auction at Ruth Hernandez's diner on Magnolia Street. Ruth had run the place since 1998 and knew everything that happened in town before it happened. "They're auctioning the factory next Friday," Ruth said, refilling Loretta's coffee. "Nobody's going to bid. The county just wants it off the books." Loretta stirred her coffee. "Loretta Briggs," Ruth said, "I have known you since you were 8 years old. I know that face." "What face?" "The face you make when you're about to do something your mother would have a strong opinion about." Loretta did not answer. She drank her coffee, she paid her bill, she left a tip that was 20% of the total. She drove home and sat at the kitchen table and looked at her grandfather's lunch pail. She looked at it for a long time. Then she went to Earl. "I want to buy the factory," she said. Earl was in his armchair reading a commentary on Ecclesiastes. He set it down. "For what? To run a school in it, a trade school. Free, for people who lost their jobs when it closed and for kids who don't have a path." Earl looked at her. He had heard her say a lot of things in 39 years. He had not heard her say this. "How $1? "You know what's going to happen," he said. "What?" "They're going to laugh at you. The white folks at the bank are going to laugh because you're a black woman trying to run an industrial property. The black folks at church are going to whisper because you're 63 years old and they think you should be retiring. Sterling is going to come back. They're going to find out a black woman bought the building they couldn't sell, and they're not going to like it. I know. And you're going to do it anyway." "Yes." He set the commentary down again. "All right," he said. "Then we do it." She called Renee that night. Loretta laid out the idea. Renee listened without interrupting, the way she had listened her whole life. And then she asked 7 questions in a row that her mother could not answer about non-profit incorporation, board structure, insurance, code compliance, and Title VII liability for free vocational training. "Mama," Renee said when she was done, "I'll come down on Saturday. We'll do this right. But you need to understand what you're walking into. I know what I'm walking into." "You think you do. You don't." "The minute Sterling realizes what you're trying to build in their old building, they are going to make your life difficult in ways you have not imagined. Rennie, baby, I have been imagining those ways my whole life." The line was quiet for a moment. "All right, Mama." The auction was in the county building on a Friday afternoon in October. 4 people attended. The clerk, the auctioneer, a man from the county assessor's office who looked like he wished he were anywhere else, and Loretta Briggs, in a navy blazer she had pressed that morning, with a cashier's check for $1 in her purse, and her grandfather's lunch pail on the seat of her car in the parking lot. The auctioneer called the lot Mercer Industrial Works Property, 4.2 acres, commercial industrial, building for all remaining fixtures, all equipment left on site, starting bid $1, as set by the county. $1, Loretta said. The room was silent. The clerk wrote something on a form. The man from the assessor's office did not look up. Going once, going twice. Sold to the bidder for $1. She signed the papers. She wrote her name in her grandfather's hand, careful and steady. The clerk handed her a manila envelope and a set of keys on a steel ring with 5 faded labels. Front entrance, loading dock, office, electrical, boiler. She walked out of the county building and drove to the factory. She parked in her old spot, front row, 3rd from the left. She sat in the car for a minute, holding the keys. Then she got out and unlocked the front door of a 100,000-square-foot building she now owned for $1. The air inside was cold and stale and smelled like dust and the ghost of machine oil. The production lines were gone. Sterling had stripped everything worth shipping and sent it to Tennessee. Along the south wall stood the older equipment that had not been worth the freight cost. A 1982 Bridgeport mill, 2 manuals lathes, an arc welder, a drill press, a bandsaw missing its blade. Loretta walked the floor slowly. She walked past the spot where her own station had been for 34 years. She walked past the break room where her grandfather's lunch pail had sat 10,000 times. She walked past the foreman's office. She stopped in the middle of the floor. She turned in a slow circle. The building was hers. She went home that night and slept for 10 hours. She had not slept 10 hours since 1982. The next morning at 4:30 she was back. She had brought a broom from her own garage. She started at the front entrance and began to sweep. Word got out the way always got out. Ruth told everyone who came to the diner. Margaret Whitfield, the retired bookkeeper, called 3 of her old co-workers. Earl mentioned it from the pulpit on Sunday, not as an announcement but as an aside in a sermon about Nehemiah and rebuilding walls. By Tuesday afternoon, Loretta had swept the entire main floor, and a young man in a too-thin jacket was standing under the half-open loading dock door, looking in. Mrs. Briggs. Marcus Cole, 28 years old. She had trained him for 6 months in 2023 before the closure. He had been one of her best apprentices. Calm hands, quiet attention, the kind of student who did not interrupt the teacher even when the teacher was wrong. "Marcus," she said, "what are you doing here?" He stepped under the door. He looked thinner than she remembered. He was wearing a name tag from the grocery store in the next town over, tucked into his shirt pocket. "Ruth told me you bought the place." "She did. She said you were in here by yourself, sweeping." "I am." He looked at the clean section behind her and the dirty section in front. He took off his jacket and hung it on a nail. "You got another broom?" They worked side by side until dark. Marcus swept. Loretta moved furniture from the break room out to the loading dock. They did not talk much. When the sun started to go down, she turned on the overhead fluorescents. Half of them flickered to life. The other half stayed dark. "Ballasts are shot," Marcus said. "I know. I reported them in 2020. Sterling never replaced them." "Sounds about right." They sat on the loading dock, with their legs hanging over the edge, and ate sandwiches she had brought from home. The parking lot was empty except for their 2 trucks. The sky over Pine Grove was turning grey at the edges, going to dark. "Mrs. Briggs," Marcus said, "what are you going to do with this place?" She thought about it. "They took the machines," she said. "They couldn't take what I know." He waited. "I can run a lathe, a mill, a grinder, a press brake, a CNC router. I can weld. I can read a print and turn it into a finished part. I spent 45 years learning things people will pay for, and I'm not the only one. Jimmy Dolan can wire a panel better than any licensed electrician in the county. Bill Torres can run a forklift through the eye of a needle. Margaret Whitfield can keep a set of books that the IRS would frame and hang in a museum. Half this town just lost their work. Some of them went to Atlanta. Some of them are sitting on porches at 10 in the morning with nothing in their hands. And there are kids in this county who need those skills and don't know where to learn them." She paused. "I want to turn this building into a place where they can. Welding, machining, electrical, fabrication, real skills, free, no tuition, no applications. You show up, you work, you learn." Marcus was quiet for a long while. "That's a big idea, Mrs. Briggs. Call me Loretta. And I know it is. That's why I'm starting small. 1 room, 1 course, 1 teacher." "2, Marcus said, "with you." She looked at him. "I'm not stocking shelves anymore," he said. "I've been thinking about leaving Pine Grove. Nothing here. But this I'd stay if it doesn't pay anything yet." "I figured that was how it started." Loretta and Marcus, 2 brooms and a plan. The next weeks were a blur of cleaning, sorting and assessing. They went through the building room by room. Sterling had taken the CNC machines, the precision grinders, and the newer lathes, but they had left the older equipment, the equipment that wasn't worth shipping. The 1982 Bridgeport, the 2 manual lathes, the arc welder, the drill press with a cracked table that Loretta knew how to fix, the band saw that needed a blade. They left the bones, Loretta said, running her hand along the Bridgeport's worn surface. Everything we need to teach with. Marcus found a chalkboard in the old training room, cracked but usable. Loretta drew up a list of tools they needed and pinned it to the wall. Earl came by after his morning visits at the church. He looked at the list. He looked at Loretta in her work pants and her grandfather's lunch pail beside her on the bench. He did not say anything for a moment. "You need a name," he said, "and paperwork, and insurance, and someone who's going to keep the books, because I know my wife and she is not going to keep books." "Renee's drafting the non-profit articles," Loretta said. "She'll have them done by the weekend." "Good. And the books?" "Margaret Whitfield. Have you asked her?" "No." "Then ask her." Margaret Whitfield said yes within 90 seconds of being asked. She was 68, retired 3 years, white, widowed, and had been keeping books in some form for 46 years. She arrived at the building the next morning with a laptop, a printer, 2 reams of paper, and a ledger book. She said was for her own peace of mind because she had never trusted laptops alone. She set up in the old foreman's office. She put her reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "Loretta Briggs," Margaret said, looking up from the ledger. "I have wanted to do something like this for 30 years, just so you know." "I know, Margaret, and I want to be clear about one more thing." "What?" Margaret took her glasses off. She set them down on the ledger. "Vance Hollister is not going to leave you alone." Loretta nodded. "I worked accounts payable for 31 years, Margaret said. "He asked for property assessments on this building twice. He has friends in real estate. He has friends on the county commission. He bought a vacation house with one of those friends 3 years ago in Highlands. The day he hears a black woman bought this building for $1 and is opening a free trade school in it, he is going to lose his mind. And then he is going to act on it." "I know, Margaret. I know you know. I'm just saying it out loud so we're all hearing the same thing." "Yes." Margaret put her glasses back on and went back to her ledger. Jimmy Dolan came on a Thursday. He had a bad knee and a worse attitude, and he stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "You're 63, Loretta." "I know how old I am, Jimmy. What are you proving?" "I'm not proving anything. I'm finishing something." He looked around the floor. Marcus was rewiring a junction box. Margaret was on the phone with an insurance company. The Bridgeport sat clean and oiled under the fluorescent lights. "You need someone to teach electrical?" Jimmy said. "I do." He uncrossed his arms. "Move that junction box." "He's got the neutral and ground reversed." He stayed. By December, they had a team. Loretta and Marcus on machining and welding. Jimmy on electrical. Bill Torres volunteered to handle materials handling and forklift training. A woman named Yvonne Carter, retired from quality control, agreed to run inventory in the tool crib. Ruth brought lunch every day. Enough food for whoever was working, and refused to take a dime for it. The building came back life piece by piece. They patched walls. They replaced the broken second-floor window. They scrubbed the bathrooms until the original tile color showed through. Marcus painted the front entrance and hung a sign he made from scrap steel, the letters cut with a plasma torch and welded to a flat plate. Pine Grove Trade Center. The roof was a problem. Loretta had known about it for years. Section 4, over the main floor, had been leaking since 2018. Sterling had put a tarp on it and called it fixed. The tarp was gone now. A roofer from the next town came out, walked it, and quoted $8,000. Loretta had $4,000 in savings, Earl had two more set aside from a small inheritance from his aunt. That left 2,000 short. Ruth heard about it the way Ruth heard about everything. "Pancake breakfast," she said into the phone. "What? Saturday morning. $5 a plate. All proceeds to the roof. Don't argue, Loretta. Be there at 7. The parking lot of Ruth's diner was full at 7 on Saturday morning. Cars lined Magnolia Street for 2 blocks. Ruth had called everyone. The pastors of 3 churches, the volunteer fire department, the retired teachers, the Black Women's Auxiliary from First Tabernacle, and the White Women's Quilting Circle from Trinity Methodist, who had not been in the same room together in 40 years, were both there pouring coffee at the same counter. People paid $5, some paid 10. A white farmer named Dale Anders, who Loretta had never spoken to in her life, came up and handed her an envelope with $400 in it. "My boy worked at Mercer for 9 years, he said. Best job he ever had. You signed off on his apprenticeship in 13. He still talks about it." By noon, Ruth had counted the money on the back counter, $11,420. "Roof and electrical panel," Margaret said, already writing it down. "And the fire extinguishers," Jimmy added. Ruth set down a fresh pot of coffee on the counter. "This town is not dead," she said. "It just forgot for a little while. The roof went up in a week. The first class started February 5th, 2025. 12 students in folding chairs, 9 men, 3 women, ages 19 to 56. Most had lost their jobs at Mercer. A few had driven over from neighboring counties. One was a young woman named Elena Vasquez, 32, 2 kids at home with her mother, recently laid off from a packaging plant, wearing steel-toed boots she had borrowed from a neighbor. Loretta stood at the front of the classroom next to the chalkboard. On the wall behind her hung a framed photograph she had found in the old foreman's desk drawer, black and white, dated April 14, 1952. 3 white men and a white woman standing in front of the brand-new factory at the ribbon cutting. And standing one step behind them, slightly to the right, was a black man in clean work clothes, his hands clasped in front of him, Thomas Briggs. Photographed at the grand opening but not named on the back of the frame, because in 1952 in Pine Grove, Georgia, the photographer had typed only the white names. Loretta had typed his name on a small white label and stuck it to the bottom of the frame in her own hand. She faced the students. "My name is Loretta Briggs," she said. "I worked in this building for 45 years. I know every inch of this floor and every machine on it. What I'm going to teach you is how to use your hands to build things that matter. Welding, machining, electrical fabrication, real skills, the kind that keep a roof over a head." She paused. "Nobody is going to charge you anything. Nobody is going to test you to get in. You show up, you work hard, you learn. That's the deal." A man in the back row raised his hand. Bill Torres's nephew, 20 years old. "Why free?" She thought about how to say it. "Because the people who built this town didn't wait for permission," she said. "My grandfather walked into this building 73 years ago and ran a lathe better than anyone who told him he shouldn't have been there. My father worked here for 28 years and lost 2 fingers and got sent to the warehouse. I worked here for 45 years. They didn't pay any of us what we were worth, and at the end they sent us home with a handshake. So we're going to do this differently. We are going to give people something nobody can take from them. That's the deal." The room was quiet. Then Elena Vasquez picked up the notebook in her lap and opened it to a blank page. "What do we start with?" she asked. The first weeks were rough. Half the students had never held a welding torch. 2 of them flinched at the sparks. One man dropped out after the second day, said it wasn't for him, and Loretta shook his hand and told him the door was open. But Elena stayed. Every morning at 7 sharp, after a 40-minute drive from her mother's house, in clean coveralls with her hair tied back. She was quiet in class, took careful notes, asked questions only when she was stuck. Loretta noticed her hands, steady, patient, the hands of a woman who had been holding things together for a long time. On her third day, Loretta showed Elena how to strike an arc on a flat plate. Elena held the electrode the way Loretta taught her, angled at 45 degrees, drew it across the steel. The arc caught on the second try. Bright blue-white. The smell of burning flux. A thin bead appeared on the plate. Elena lifted her helmet. The bead was uneven, too wide in places, with porosity at the start. But it was there. Metal had stuck to metal. "Not bad," Loretta said. "Travel speed's too fast and you're pulling at the start. Keep the arc tight. Try again." Elena flipped the helmet down and tried again. Better. And again. Better still. By the end of the first week, her beads were straight and consistent, and Marcus Loretta tied privately the type that Elena was the fastest learner he had ever seen. "Reminds me of someone," Marcus said. "Don't. I wasn't going to say it." The weeks passed. The Pine Grove Trade Center found its rhythm. Loretta taught welding and machining in the morning. Marcus ran the afternoon sessions on print reading and measurement. Jimmy taught electrical safety on Tuesdays and Thursdays and complained the entire time, which the students learned to interpret as affection. Margaret kept the books. She filed the non-profit paperwork with the IRS. She wrote thank you letters to every donor by hand, including the $400 from Dale Anders. She set up a small lending library in what used to be a supply closet, stocked with technical manuals, GED prep books, and a few novels she had pulled from the county library's discard pile. Ruth ran the kitchen. She brought soup and sandwiches every day. She set up a folding table in the break room and fed whoever was hungry. She refused payment. When Loretta tried to give her something out of the donation fund, Ruth waved her off. "This is my investment," Ruth said. "I'm investing in people who eat lunch at my diner." That's good business. Word spread beyond Pine Grove. A reporter from the Macon Telegraph drove out in March and wrote a story. The article called Loretta a local hero, which made her uncomfortable enough to fold the paper and put it in a drawer. But the article brought people. By April, enrollment had doubled. A woman who had lost her job at a poultry plant, a 19-year-old who had dropped out of high school, a 50-year-old long-haul trucker whose back couldn't take the road anymore. Different stories, the same need, a skill that could open a door. Elena finished the 12-week welding course in 9. Her final test piece was a T-joint weld on quarter-inch plate, inspected by a retired weld inspector Loretta had worked with at Mercer in the 90s. "Clean work," the inspector said, bending the sample. "Who taught her?" "I did." "You taught her well." Elena stood by the welding station holding her certificate, which Margaret had printed on heavy cardstock at the library. Her eyes were wet. "Nobody ever told me I was good at anything," she said. "You're good at this," Loretta said. "You're going to get better." Things were working. Loretta let herself, for the first time in months, believe that they might keep working. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon in late April, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Marcus came in from the front. "Loretta, there's a man in a suit asking for you." She set down the wrench. She walked to the front door. Vance Hollister stood in the entrance with a leather portfolio in one hand and a charcoal suit on his back. The expression on his face was somewhere between surprise and calculation. "Loretta," he said, "this is impressive. I had no idea you'd done all this. What do you want, Mr. Hollister?" "Vance, please," he smiled, the kind of smile that probably worked on people who had never seen him close a factory. "I came down because I have a proposal for you. I'm working. It'll only take a minute. Could we sit down?" She did not invite him to sit down. She stood in the doorway. He opened the portfolio anyway. He turned a sheet of paper around so she could see it. There was a number on it, large and centered, $50,000. "There's a developer interested in this site," Vance said. "Mixed use, retail and senior living. They've authorized me to make you a generous offer. $50,000 cash." That's a remarkable return on a $1 investment, Loretta. I want to be clear, that's a friendly number. No bargaining required. We close in 30 days. You walk away with capital you can use, how you choose. She looked at the number. $50,000 was real money. It would pay off the small mortgage they still had on the house. It would put a buffer in retirement that she did not have. It was the safe answer. It was the answer her father, who had taken $9,000 and a transfer, would have understood. No, she said. Vance blinked. He had not. She realized, seriously considered that she might say no. Loretta, listen, I understand your attachment to this place. I do. 45 years, your family history, all of it. But you should consider, you had your chance to care about this building, she said. You didn't. His jaw tightened. The smile was still there, but it had become an effort. I am trying to do you a favor, Loretta. I don't think you understand the situation. Maintaining 100,000 square foot industrial property is not a hobby. The code requirements alone, fire suppression, ADA compliance, electrical, the costs are going to eat you alive. People like you don't have the resources to fight off code enforcement when it comes. There it was. She had been waiting for it. People like Missy, she said. He heard himself. She watched him hear it. She watched him decide in real time not to take it back. Operators in your situation, he said. I meant new operators, inexperienced, without industrial property management background. I see. This building has problems, Loretta. Problems Sterling couldn't fix profitably. That's why we listed it and couldn't sell it. The county is going to come in here at some point and start writing violations. You don't have the depth to absorb that. Mr. Hollister, yes. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Tuskegee University. I hold 2 patents on the Mercer 4400 series. There's a plaque with my name on it, 12 feet behind you. I have spent 45 years on this floor. I know more about the depth of this building than anyone who ever signed your paychecks. He recovered fast. She gave him that. Of course you do, he said. That wasn't what I meant. Goodbye, Mr. Hollister. She held the door open. He paused. He looked like he was going to say something else. I hope you'll think it over, he said finally. He left. She watched the black sedan pull out of the parking lot, turn onto Magnolia, and disappear. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the Pine Grove County Building Inspector's office. 12 code violations, 30 days to demonstrate compliance or face condemnation proceedings. Loretta read the letter twice. She sat in her car in the parking lot and read it a 3rd time. Some of the violations were real, some were exaggerated. 1. A structural integrity citation on a load-bearing column that she had personally inspected 3 weeks earlier was simply false. The building inspector was named Vernon Pruitt. The county commissioner who oversaw building inspections was also named Vernon Pruitt. They were father and son. She drove to Margaret's office. Margaret, the county commissioner. Vernon Pruitt Sr., what do you know about him? Margaret took her glasses off. She set down her pen. He went to Wharton. Loretta waited. Class of 2002. Loretta closed her eyes for a moment. Vance, Loretta said. Same class, Margaret said. Same fraternity. There's a photograph on the internet of the 2 of them at a class reunion in 2018. I found it last month after that auction. I have been waiting for you to ask me. Loretta sat down across from her. She put her hand flat on the desk. Margaret, yes, how bad is this going to get? Honey, Margaret said gently. You already know the answer. She did. She had known since the moment Vance said the words people like you. She had known since the personnel man had told her the floor was no place for a young lady. She had known her whole life. She picked up her phone and called her daughter. Rennie, baby, I need you to come home. How long? I don't know yet. What do you need me to bring? Everything you have on Title VII retaliation, tortious interference, civil conspiracy, and county-level public corruption. And the name of every federal contact you have at the Department of Justice. The line was quiet. "I'll be there in 5 hours," Renee said. Renee Briggs-Patterson arrived that evening in a charcoal pantsuit with a rolling briefcase and a leather bag over her shoulder. She was 40 the older of Loretta's 2 children, a partner at her firm 3 years now, with a reputation in Birmingham labor circles for being the lawyer the bigger firm underestimated until it was too late. She walked into the kitchen, set the bag down, kissed her father on the cheek, and turned to her mother. "Show me everything." Loretta had everything ready. The letter from the county, Vance's offer letter from the previous week, Margaret's notes on the Wharton connection, Loretta's own log of every interaction with Vance over the past 9 years, dates what was said, the misnaming, the comment to Andre Whitman in 2019 that Loretta had written down that night because she had known even then that she might need it someday. Renee read through the file slowly. She did not interrupt. She asked 3 short questions. She made notes in the margin of a yellow pad. When she was done, she looked up. "Mama, this is a civil conspiracy. He is conspiring with a county official to use code enforcement as a pretext to drive you out of property he wants to redevelop. The fact that the inspector is the commissioner's son is not even subtle. The Wharton connection is the cherry on top. This is a Department of Justice public corruption case waiting to be filed. How long? For DOJ to move? Years. That's not going to help us in 30 days. No." Renee tapped the pad with her pen. "But Mama, code enforcement. We can fight code enforcement on our own. Most of these violations are real. We fix them. The ones that aren't, we challenge in writing with documentation. They've already overplayed their hand by including the structural citation. That citation is going to be the loose thread that unravels the whole sweater. Rennie, we don't have the money to fix the real ones. Then we raise it. You have a town. That's what your father said." "He's right, Rennie. This is going to put you on the wrong side of people you do business with." "Mama, I've been on the wrong side of those people my whole life. I just usually pretend I'm not." Loretta smiled for the first time in 3 days. "All right, baby. Tell me what to do." The volunteers came the next morning. Marcus had spent the night calling everyone he knew. Then he called everyone Loretta knew. The first to arrive was a plumber named Garcia, who had worked at Mercer for 11 years before the closure. He drove in with a van full of fittings and said he could handle the restroom work. Behind him came 2 electricians, both former Mercer guys. By the end of that day, 23 people had come to the building. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, welders. Some were former students. Some had never set foot inside but had heard what Loretta was doing and wanted to be part of saving it. Elena Vasquez took over scheduling. She showed up with a clipboard, a cooler full of water, and a chart she had drawn up on butcher paper, dividing the 12 violations into work teams with deadlines. She nailed the chart to the wall by the front entrance. She updated it every evening with a red marker, drawing thick lines through the items as they cleared. "Who put you in charge?" Jimmy asked. "I did. Somebody had to." He looked at the chart. He nodded once. "This works." Loretta tried to do everything. She was on the floor at 4:30 every morning, working alongside the volunteers, hauling pipe, pulling wire, cutting ramp lumber. She skipped meals. She ignored the tightness in her chest that had been building for weeks. She told herself it was age and weather, and the fact that she had not slept more than 5 hours a night in 3 weeks. On the 8th day, she was carrying a section of steel railing up the stairs to the second-floor exit when her vision went grey at the edges. Her legs stopped working. The railing clattered down the steps. She sat down hard on the landing, her hands flat on the concrete, her heart hammering in a rhythm that did not feel like hers. Marcus found her 30 seconds later. Loretta, look at me. Get Earl. Don't call an ambulance. Get Earl." He called both. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. They put her on a stretcher, started an IV, loaded her in. Earl met them at the regional hospital in Macon. He sat next to her bed and held her hand and didn't say anything because he was a pastor and he knew when to not say anything. The doctor was a young black woman with tired eyes and a direct manner. She told Loretta her heart was under serious strain, blood pressure dangerously high. Early signs of cardiac fatigue, no heart attack not yet, but her body was sending a warning that it would not send twice. "You need to rest," the doctor said. "Real rest, not the kind where you sit down for 10 minutes and then go haul steel. I have 22 days left on a 30-day deadline. You will have 0 days if your heart gives out on a factory floor, Mrs. Briggs." Loretta looked at the ceiling. She listened to the beep of the heart monitor. She thought about all the things that would stop if she stopped. "Loretta," Earl said quietly. She turned her head. "You built something," he said. "Something real. Something that doesn't need you to die for it. Let them carry it." She looked at him for a long time. "I don't know how to do that," she said. "You learn, the way you learned everything else, one day at a time." Marcus came to the hospital that night. She told him to take over the renovation. Run the crews. Make the decisions. Don't call her unless something fell. "I'm 28 years old, Loretta. I was stocking shelves 7 months ago. People grow into what you let them become. I'm letting you." He left the hospital and drove straight back to the building. He gathered the volunteers in the break room. He told them Loretta was alive, was going to be all right, and was not coming back to the floor for at least 2 weeks. He pointed at Elena's chart on the wall. "She trusts us to finish this, so we finish this." They worked. Garcia finished the plumbing in 4 days, replacing every fixture and drain that failed code. The electricians pulled new wire through the conduit, upgraded the panel to 100 amp services, installed emergency lighting above every exit. A carpenter named Tom, who had heard about the project from his pastor, built wheelchair ramps for both entrances and widened 3 doorways to meet ADA clearance. Fire suppression was the hardest. A sprinkler system for a building that size cost more than they had raised. Marcus found a fire protection company in Atlanta that agreed to donate the materials and send 2 installers if the volunteers handled the labor. The company's owner had read the Macon Telegraph article. He said it reminded him of his own father, who had worked in a steel mill for 32 years before it closed. Jimmy ran the electrical inspection prep. He tested every outlet, every switch, every connection. He labeled the panel with the precision of a man who had spent 30 years wiring machines that could kill you if you got sloppy. "You know what the difference is between good electrical work and bad electrical work," he told the volunteers. "Bad electrical work burns the building down. So don't do bad work." Renee was on the phone for 12 hours a day. She filed an open records request with the county for every building inspection performed by Vernon Pruitt, Jr. in the previous 5 years. She filed another one for every property on which Vernon Pruitt, Sr. had voted as commissioner during the same period. She started compiling a spreadsheet. The patterns were not subtle. 8 buildings flagged for code violations in the past 4 years. 6 of them subsequently sold at distressed prices to a single LLC registered in Delaware. The LLC's managing partner was a Wharton classmate of Vance Hollister and Vernon Pruitt Sr. "Mama," Renee said one evening at the kitchen table, "this isn't just about you. They've done this before. 6 times. Loretta, sitting in the recliner Earl had insisted she stay and looked over. 6, at least. I'm still finding more. Rennie, yes, Mama, find a federal prosecutor. Already did. Northern District of Georgia Public Corruption Unit. Her name is Karen Holloway. She used to prosecute OSHA cases. I sent her the file yesterday morning." Loretta closed her eyes. "Go get them, baby." "Already going, Mama." Wendell Tate came to the building on the 11th day. He was 67, white, retired, the senior building inspector for Pine Grove County until Jr. had been hired in 2019. Wendell had been let go 6 months later. He had not spoken publicly about the reasons. He had been carrying them around for 5 years. He walked into the building during a lunch break. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands. Loretta was sitting in the break room because Earl had finally let her come back to the building on the condition that she sat. Marcus had set her up at a folding table with coffee and a stack of paperwork. Wendell came over. He stood next to the table. "Mrs. Briggs, Mr. Tate, you don't know me, I know you. You inspected the boiler, Mercer, in 2014. You wrote up Sterling for not maintaining the relief valves. They got it fixed within a week." He looked surprised. "You remember that? I remember every inspector who ever did right by that building." He sat down across from her. He turned his hat in his hands twice. He set it on the table. "I retired 3 years ago," he said, "officially. The truth is they pushed me out. I wrote up 2 buildings on Vernon Jr.'s first month on the job. Both were owned by friends of his father. Vernon Sr. called me into his office and asked me to revise the citations. I refused. 6 months later, my position was reorganized. They gave me a small pension and a thank you certificate." Loretta waited. "I have files," Wendell said. "I made copies of every inspection I performed in my last 4 years. I kept them in a footlocker in my garage. I don't know why I kept them, just a feeling. And I want to give them to you, or to your lawyer, or to whoever is going to do something with them." Loretta looked at him for a long moment. "Why now?" she asked. "Why this one?" Wendell looked down at his hat. "My grandson, he's 19. He started the welding 2 weeks ago. He came home last Friday and showed his grandmother the first weld he ever ran. He was so proud," she cried. "He asked us why we didn't have anything like this when his daddy was 19. He looked up. "I'm 70 years old, Mrs. Briggs. I have been waiting my whole life to do something brave. I'm just doing it late." Loretta reached across the table and put her hand on his. "You're not late, Mr. Tate," she called Renee that night. "The witness. Tell me." "Wendell Tate, senior county building inspector before Vernon Jr. He has files, 5 years of them." The line was very quiet. "Mama." "What?" "Tell him not to say a word to anyone else. I'm calling Karen Holloway in the morning. We're going to want to walk those files into her office in person." "Yes, baby." On the morning of day 26 of the 30-day deadline, Vernon Pruitt Jr. pulled into the parking lot in a county truck. The volunteers had finished the work 3 days early. Elena's chart on the wall had a thick red line through every item. The fire suppression system was operational. The electrical panel was up to code. The ramps were installed. The restrooms were ADA compliant. Vernon Jr. got out of his truck. He had a clipboard. He had a smug expression. He was 32 years old, and he had been given his position by his father. He walked through the front door. He stopped. In the lobby, in folding chairs and in clusters along the walls, were 35 people, volunteers, former students. Current students: Margaret, Earl in his clerical collar, Wendell Tate in his retirement suit, Renee in her Birmingham pantsuit with a leather bag at her feet and a thick folder in her lap, Elena with her clipboard, Marcus standing by the front desk with his arms crossed. Loretta sat at the front desk in the navy blazer she had worn to the auction. She was in a wheeled office chair. Earl had insisted on the chair. She was tired, but she was upright. "Mr. Pruitt," she said. He stopped in the middle of the lobby. He looked at the room. "I'm here to perform the follow-up inspection. Of course, I'll need access to the main floor and the utility rooms. You have full access. My foreman, Mr. Cole, will walk with you. So will Mr. Tate. So will my attorney." Vernon Jr.'s expression did not move, but his hand on the clipboard tightened. "Mr. Tate." Wendell stood up. He walked to the front of the room. He put his hat on the desk. "Hello, Vernon. What are you doing here?" "I'm here as a guest of Mrs. Briggs. I'll be observing the inspection. I'll also be filing an affidavit with the U.S. Attorney's Northern District Office in Atlanta this afternoon regarding inspections performed by your office between 2019 and 2024. Renee stood. She did not raise her voice. "Mr. Pruitt, my name is Renee Briggs-Patterson. I am Mrs. Briggs's attorney in this matter. The Inspector General of the Northern District has received a referral from this office regarding your inspection record. You are entitled to perform today's follow-up. You are also entitled to know that everything that occurs in this building during this inspection will be observed, documented, and witnessed. There are 11 witnesses in this room. There is also a videographer." A young man Loretta did not recognize raised a small camera from the back of the room. Vernon Jr.'s face went still. He looked at the chart on the wall. He looked at the room. He looked at his clipboard. "I think," he said carefully, "that I'd like to reschedule. Some of my colleagues should be present for an inspection of this scope. I'll be back next week." "You have 4 days left on the 30-day deadline, Mr. Pruitt," Renee said. "I'll be back tomorrow." He walked back to his truck. He drove out of the parking lot. He did not look back. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Jimmy Dolan said, "Well, I'll be damned." Marcus laughed. Then Elena, then Ruth, who had been holding a tray of cookies and now nearly dropped them. Then Margaret, dryly, wiping her glasses. Earl put his hand on Loretta's shoulder. She closed her eyes for a second. "Mama," Renee said quietly behind her. "Don't celebrate yet. The hard part starts now. I know, baby. They're going to fight, I know. It's going to get ugly. It's already ugly, Renee. It's just going to be loud now, too." Vernon Jr. never did the follow-up inspection. The next morning, a different inspector arrived from a neighboring county. He walked the building for 2 hours. He cleared every violation. He left without comment. 3 weeks later, the U.S. Attorney's Northern District of Georgia announced an investigation into the Pine Grove County Building Inspector's Office. The investigation expanded within a month to include Commissioner Vernon Pruitt Sr., an LLC registered in Delaware, and several individuals connected to a Wharton alumni network. Vance Hollister's name appeared in a footnote, then on a subpoena, then in a sealed indictment that became unsealed 8 months later. But before any of that, on a Tuesday afternoon in 2025, the first graduating class of the Pine Grove Trade Center received their certificates. 12 students. 8 had completed welding. 2 had completed electrical. 2 had completed both. Margaret printed the certificates on heavy cardstock. Loretta signed each one. Elena received hers last. She held it in both hands. She looked at it for a long time. "Can I start my own shop?" she asked. Loretta did not understand the question at first. "There's an empty bay on the east side," Elena said. "The one with the roll-up door. I've been looking at it every day for 4 months. If I could put a welding rig in there and take repair jobs, small fabrication, farm equipment, trailers, that kind of thing, I could pay rent. Whatever you think is fair." Loretta looked at her. 5 months ago, Elena had walked through the front door in borrowed boots, afraid of an arc. "Rent is $100 a month," Loretta said. "Utilities included. That's too low. Take it or leave it." She took it. 3 days later, a letter arrived from a law firm in Atlanta. It was addressed to Loretta Briggs and Renee Briggs-Patterson. It contained a 1-page communication from Vance Hollister on the letterhead of his personal attorney, dated and signed. "Dear Mrs. Briggs," it read, "I have learned that recent code enforcement matters in Pine Grove County have caused concern and disruption in your operations. I want to be clear that I had no role in those matters. I regret how the situation came across, and I am sorry for any misunderstanding that arose between us during our last conversation. I never intended to cause harm. I wish you continued success in your endeavors. Sincerely, Vance Hollister." Loretta read it twice. She handed it to Renee. "Read this. Tell me what it doesn't say." Renee read it. "It doesn't admit anything. It doesn't say he made the call to Pruitt. It doesn't say his offer was contingent on coercion. It doesn't say he used the phrase people like you. It doesn't say he fabricated a structural citation. It just says he regrets how things looked." "Right," He's positioning. His attorney drafted this for the federal investigation. I know. Loretta took the letter back. She read the last line again. I never intended to cause harm. Mama, are you going to respond? Yes. What are you going to say? Loretta thought about it. Nothing, she said. I'm going to file it. I'm going to forward a copy to Karen Holloway, and I'm going to go back to teaching. That's it. That's it. He doesn't get a conversation, Renee. He gets to live in a world where the thing he didn't get the answer he wanted. That's the only thing I want from him. That's all anyone like him should ever get. She filed the letter in the same drawer where she had put the Macon Telegraph article. 2 pieces of paper that meant something to other people. Neither of them meant much to her. Vance Hollister was indicted in January 2026 on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud against the public, conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation, and tortious interference. Sterling Capital Group fired him within 48 hours of the indictment unsealing. His wife filed for divorce in February. The marriage had survived 2 earlier filings. It did not survive this one. Vernon Pruitt Sr. pleaded guilty in March to taking bribes in connection with 7 property transactions. He was sentenced to 41 months in federal prison. Vernon Pruitt Jr. pleaded guilty to falsifying inspection records. He received 18 months and a permanent bar from public office. Vance Hollister went to trial. His attorneys argued at length the entire matter was a misunderstanding inflated by the overzealous federal prosecutors. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and convicted him on 2 of 3 counts. He was sentenced to 22 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $400,000 in restitution. His engineering management consulting license was revoked. 3 industry associations expelled him within the same week. In a statement read by his attorney on the courthouse steps, Vance said he respectfully disagreed with the verdict, that he had worked his entire career in service of his industry and his family, and that he was confident an appeal would vindicate him. He did not mention Loretta Briggs by name. His appeal was denied. He served 17 months. When he was released, he moved to a smaller house in a different state and told the people he met there that he had retired early. When his name came up in industry circles, people changed the subject. He never returned to Pine Grove. As far as Loretta Briggs ever knew, he never said the words "I was wrong" out loud. That was what she had expected. That was the truth her grandfather had taught her in a story he had told her exactly twice when she was a child. About a foreman who had let him run a lathe in 1952 and had never said the word sorry for the back stairwell or the separate water fountain. Because men like that did not say those words. They just sometimes, occasionally, when the mood struck them, opened as a door and let you walk through. And you walked through. And you built what you built. She did not need his apology. She had not been waiting for it. 2 years after the closure of Mercer Industrial Works, the Pine Grove Trade Center hosted an open house to mark its anniversary. Marcus and Elena and Ruth had organized it without telling Loretta. Earl had been in on it. Margaret had been in on it. Jimmy had complained the entire planning process and shown up an hour early to set up chairs. On the morning of the open house, Loretta drove to the building at her usual time. She pulled into the parking lot, expecting it to be empty. It was already half full. A banner hung across the front entrance, white letters on blue, Pine Grove Trade Center. 2 years. She sat in the car for a moment. She got out. The building was full. Former students, current students, volunteers, neighbors, people from 3 counties, 2 reporters, one from the Macon Telegraph, one from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Ruth had set up the break room with enough food for 150 people. Elena's shop on the east side was open, her 2 apprentices demonstrating weld techniques to 2 teenagers from a high school an hour away. Jimmy was giving tours of the electrical lab, explaining breaker panels to a group of women in church clothes. Marcus found her near the classroom door. He was wearing a collared shirt, which Loretta had now seen him wear maybe 4 times in 2 years. "We wanted to surprise you." "You did. There's a reporter from the Atlanta paper. She wants to talk to you. Have her talk to the students." They're the story. Marcus smiled. "She did. Now she wants to talk to you." The reporter was young, maybe 30, with a recorder and a notebook. She sat across from Loretta in the foreman's office, the same office where Loretta had found the photograph of her grandfather. "Mrs. Briggs, you bought this building for $1. What's it worth to you now?" Loretta thought about it. "I don't think about it that way. If you had to put a number on it, I couldn't. A building is just walls until somebody fills it with purpose. The purpose is what has value, not the walls. Sterling Capital Group reportedly offered you $50,000 for this site before things took the turn they took. You turned it down." "I did. Why?" "Because this building isn't mine to sell." The reporter looked up from her notebook. "You own it. My name's on the deed. But look around this room. Elena Vasquez runs a fabrication shop that supports her family. Marcus Cole manages a training program that's graduated 157 people in years. Jimmy Dolan teaches electrical to kids who would have been on unemployment. Ruth Hernandez feeds everybody who walks through the door. Margaret Whitfield keeps the books straight. Wendell Tate teaches a building inspection seminar twice a year and tells his story every time. My husband does Wednesday night Bible study in the break room for anyone who wants. My daughter put together a free legal clinic on the 3rd Saturday of every month. I don't own this. They do. I'm just the person who held the door." The reporter wrote that down. She asked a few more questions. Loretta answered them briefly and then excused herself. She walked through the building slowly, the way she had walked through it the day she bought it. Everything was different now. The main floor was divided into 7 workshop bays. Each had equipment, lighting, ventilation, and someone working in it. Elena's shop hummed with a grinder. Davis's small engine repair bay smelled like motor oil. A woman named Rosa, a graduate, was setting up a small upholstery business in the bay closest to the loading dock. The classroom was full of folding chairs and a new whiteboard. The photograph of Thomas Briggs and the Mercer family still hung on the wall, level and centered. Below it, on the shelf, sat her grandfather's lunch pail. Next to the lunch pail, Elena's first welding helmet. Next to that, Marcus's teaching binder, thick with lesson plans. 3 generations of work. The break room was Ruth's domain. Tables with real tablecloths, a coffee station that ran all day, the chalkboard menu, today's soup and sandwich, written in Ruth's handwriting. The lending library filled one wall. The daycare room had finger paintings on the walls and small shoes lined up by the door. Through the window, 3 children were building a tower of blocks, while a volunteer read to a 4th. She passed the east hallway. Jimmy looked up from his lecture and nodded at her once. 33 years of acquaintance in a single gesture. Near the front entrance she found Wendell Tate, standing by a bookshelf showing a teenage boy how to read a fire suppression schematic. The boy was Wendell's grandson. The grandson had finished welding and was working on electrical. Wendell turned when he saw her. "Mrs. Briggs, Mr. Tate." He smiled at her, an old man's smile, hard-earned. "I'm glad I lived to see this," he said. "I'm glad you helped me build it." She found Marcus in the classroom, arranging chairs for the afternoon session. He had grown into the role of director in ways she had not fully expected. He spoke with confidence. He made decisions. He had started a mentorship program that paired graduates with current students. 3 local employers had agreed to hire from the trade center's pipeline. "I want to tell you something," she said. He stopped. "Okay. When you showed up at the loading dock that first day, I didn't know what I was doing. I had a building and a broom and no plan. You were the first person who believed in it." He shook his head. "I didn't believe in it. I believed in you. The plan came later." "Well, The plan's a director, permanent, paid. Now, Loretta, we're already paying you a stipend that you give back every quarter. We don't have the money. We will. The Atlanta paper is going to write about us. When that article comes out, the donations will follow. I want you running this place, not volunteering. Running it. He looked at the classroom, the chalkboard, the welding stations visible through the doorway. I used to think staying in Pine Grove meant I'd failed, he said. Everybody I went to school with left, got jobs in the city, and there I was, stocking shelves. Now I think leaving would have been the failure. The hard part was staying. She put her hand on his shoulder. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. At 4 o'clock, the open house wound down. People drifted out in small groups, carrying plates of Ruth's food, talking about what they had seen. The parking lot emptied slowly. The building grew quiet. Loretta walked through it one more time, turning off lights as she went. It was her favorite part of the day, this walk through the building at closing. Each switch she flipped darkened a room that had been full of people, full of noise, full of work. The silence at the end of the day was not empty. It was earned. She stopped in the classroom. Her grandfather's photograph looked down at her from the wall. Below it, the lunch pail, the helmet, the binder. A small white index card had appeared on the shelf since the morning. Marcus had written on it in his careful block letters and propped it against the lunch pail. Thomas Briggs, 1952. Loretta Briggs, 2024. The work continues. She stood there for a moment. This is a work of fiction. The characters, the company, the county, and the events depicted are imagined. They are drawn from 1,000 smaller true things that have happened to 1,000,000 quieter women in places very much like this one. Women who walked into buildings they were told they did not belong in and ran lathes better than the men who told them so. Women who outlasted the people who underestimated them and built something the underestimating could not take away. Loretta Briggs worked in this building for 45 years. They did not give her what she had earned. They gave her $200 and called her by the wrong name. She bought the building back for $1. She turned it into something a corporation never could. A place where people mattered more than numbers. A place where a black girl in a borrowed pair of boots could become a welder with her own shop. A place where a young man who was stocking shelves could become a director. A place where a retired inspector who had been carrying a secret for 5 years could finally set it down. Vance Hollister served 17 months in federal prison. He never said he was sorry. Not really. He said he regretted how things looked. He said there was misunderstanding on both sides. He said he never intended harm. The words "I was wrong" never crossed his lips, and to the end of his life, in the smaller house, in the different state, he believed in some deep private place that he had been treated unfairly by people who did not understand the pressures he had been under. That is how it usually goes with men like him. Real-world bigots rarely have redemption arcs. They double down, they rationalize, and they only stop when something outside them stops them. The lesson is not about waiting for their apology. It never was. The lesson is about what you build while you are not waiting. Loretta Briggs was 66 years old when she walked through the Trade Center for the last time as its founder. She kept her grandfather's lunch pail. She kept the photograph in her heart and the new index card propped against it on the shelf. She walked out into the late afternoon light. Earl was waiting for her by the car. Ready? Almost. She turned and looked at the building. The brick was still stained with 73 years of weather. Marcus's welded sign still hung above the entrance. The windows were dark now. In the morning they would be lit again. They would be lit every morning because this place had people who needed it and people who filled it and a purpose that had outlived any one woman's name on any one deed. Show up on time. Do what they ask. Learn everything you can. Her grandfather had told her father that. Her father had told her that. She had told her children and her grandchildren and her students that she had learned one more thing. You can lose everything you worked for. But if you know how to build, you can never really be finished. She took Earl's hand. They walked to the car together. Behind them, the building stood quiet and solid against the darkening Georgia sky. Tomorrow it would be full again. It always was. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you.